What's happening, everyone? This is Phil with PrecisionLED.com, and today we have a 2013 Hyundai Genesis Coupe that will be installing LED interior lights, backup reverse lights, and the trunk LED strip on this model. Let's go ahead and get started. We're starting off with the front overhead map lights on the Genesis Coupe. As you can see on the driver's side, we've already done the installation, so we're showing you the passenger side only. You'll be using the flat end of the serrated knife tool that comes with the Precision LED lighting kit and pushing down on the button of the lens to create some clearance so you can get the tool in between the lens and the plastic housing. Once you have it in, just wedge and it should pop out the two clips on the top and the bottom that are holding it in place. Now that you have that taken care of, you can remove the halogen bulb. If it's hot, just use a towel, as you can see in the example here, to remove that bulb. Now that it's out, put the new LED in and make sure that you're checking for polarity to make sure it works before you go ahead and put that lens back on. Now that you have the bulb in place and tested, you're going to just put the lens back in place. Now the lens will take some force, so just give it a couple good hits and it should pop right back into place without any problems. Moving on to the vanity mirror lights. Now there's an important thing to know about these vanity mirror lights before you do anything. We'll be using the crowbar shaped tool, and you're only going to be prying from the side where the switch is present. That is because on the opposite end is where the wiring is. If you try to pry the housing out from where the wiring is or the opposite end, you are going to break the vanity mirror housing. So make sure you're very careful with that. This one is a little bit tighter in place on some of the installations we have done, so make sure that you're very careful and you do take your time because it will take a good amount of force to release the vanity mirror housing from the roof liner. Once you have everything out, you can use that pointed wedge tool to remove the old halogen bulb and just replace it with the new LED bulb that comes in your kit. You do want to make sure that you are reversing that LED so it is pointing down through the clear lens to make sure the light's going the proper way. Once you've tested it out, you can go ahead and reinsert the housing back into the roof liner and check everything off. For those of you that purchased the glove box LED option, you can use the opposite side of the crowbar shaped tool to remove the housing from the plastic trim. This is a pretty straightforward installation. You're going to turn counterclockwise on the black portion of the housing to remove it from the casing. You do want to remove the electrical wiring so that you are able to remove that halogen bulb while it cools down. You can use a towel if it's still too hot if you would like to. The LED installs the same way the halogen bulb came out, and you're going to be turning it clockwise when you reassemble to lock it in place. Now, to test to make sure that glove box works, make sure you put the car in the accessory power on setting with the key. For those of you with the remote start, just hit the start button twice without your foot on the brake, and that should get the power to turn on without turning on the engine. Once you know everything works, go ahead and put everything back in place, and we'll move on. The license plate light, you can use two tools to make the removal process a little bit easier. There are clips on each side of the license plate module that you'll be using to pry loose the entire module from the assembly. Now it's pretty simple, all it takes a little bit of patience. Once you have one side, just work your way back and forth until the piece pops out. Now the actual removal of the bulb is much simpler. It is a twist to lock piece. You'll be turning counterclockwise to remove the housing from the bulb assembly, and then you'll be able to remove the halogen bulb. Once it's out, like every other piece, just put the LED in, check for polarity to make sure it works, and then reassemble. When you do reassemble, make sure you're going clockwise when you're turning that piece back into place to secure it. For those of you that purchased the trunk LED option for the Hyundai Genesis Coupe, this is the installation method of that single bulb. We'll be using two tools, the crowbar piece and the pointed wedge, to get pretty easy access to the housing itself. As you can see in the video, we're just using the crowbar shaped tool to wedge in and then using the pointed wedge to actually pull back on the clip that's holding it in place. You can also use that pointed wedge to remove the old halogen bulb and replace it with the new LED. The fitment is quite snug, so you may want to bend the copper on that piece back a little bit so you can get the new LED in place without too much trouble. Once it's in, all you have to do is check for polarity, make sure it works, and reassemble. Here we have the LED trunk strip light option that you can purchase separately on PrecisionLED.com. Now this is going to take the place of the halogen bulb that you see here in the video and replace it with the LED trunk strip light and uses power from that halogen bulb to make the system work. Now, your kit should include a small bag of trunk LED accessories that's going to include the connectors you will need to make this thing work. The first thing you need to do is use the Festoon type power connector and get it into place in the trunk light assembly. Now, you're going to thread the wire through from the trunk strip LED so that you get a good clean installation. Once you have that in place, you can remove the protective backing on the back of that trunk strip LED to reveal the adhesive coating. You can take that adhesive coating, stick it right to the metal of the roof of your trunk in a position that you prefer. Now that you have the trunk strip in place, make sure you pat it down to apply the adhesive correctly, and there are a couple included 3M double-sided foam pads for you to use to clean up your wiring when you're done. With your wiring in order, you can then connect the male and female ends of that connector here for power back to the trunk light housing. With that in, you can connect the power back to the housing itself and test to make sure that the lights work. Great. Now that you see the lights work, you can tidy up your wiring, reassemble the housing, put it back in its place, and you're all set. Last but not least, we have the backup reverse LEDs that we'll be installing on this Genesis Coupe. Now, in the rear of your trunk, there are two panels, one on the driver's side, one on the passenger side, that allows you access to the rear taillight housings. You're going to be using a 10mm socket and socket wrench to remove the 4 bolts holding that housing in place. Let's go ahead and do that now. Now that we have that removed, you're going to remove the harness connector that's providing power to the taillights before you remove the taillight housing from the chassis. Now you can either pull away or push, but either way, that housing is going to come out really nice and clean. As you can see, on the very end, there is the backup reverse light bulb. One twist counterclockwise will remove the bulb so that you can replace it with the new LED from PrecisionLED.com. When you are reinstalling the taillight housing back into the chassis, make sure looking at the 4 bolts to line it up. On the side of that housing, there's also one guiding pin that you need to follow to make sure that you get a snug fitment for that taillight.